All right, welcome everybody to the goal setting workshop. This is a bonus session for those of you who purchased the Best Year Ever course. I know you got a lot of value out of it, as I did, but today I want to share with you something that can be a great add-on to your 1 year goal setting agenda, the process that you take. And it's something that has really helped me, and it's actually something that the process is so simple that I've actually stuck with it. Not only simple, but powerful, and that I've stuck with it for the last 3 years. And so I'm really excited about walking you through this process. It's something that I've been working on and using. I love my 90-day goal setting process, and I think it'd be a great complement to those of you who have set your yearly goals, but maybe right now as we're recording, you're about a month and a half into it, and you're already feeling like you've fallen off the wagon. Well, the easiest way to get back up is not to wait till next January. It's to institute 90-day goals. And I'm going to walk you through the process again that has helped me. I've got some slides to share with you. I've got a couple of you who sent me some questions. And if you're here today live, there's a chat box, and I want to encourage you to ask your questions. No question's a dumb question. What is it that you're struggling with right now related to your goals? That's what we're here today to talk about, and that's what we're going to do for the next hour today. So I see we've got more people coming into the room. So glad you guys are here. And again, if you guys have questions, ask them. And as I share with you my process, if you need more clarification or you have a follow-up question, go ahead and ask it in the chat box, and I'll explain that as well. So let me pull up the few of the slides that I have today, and you guys are welcome to take notes. I'd encourage you to write them down, and I'll tell you exactly what we're going to cover today. So our topic today is my 90-day goal setting workshop. So literally within the next hour, probably take about 30-40 minutes for me to cover it, and then we'll leave some time for questions. You're going to have the opportunity to learn the 90-day goal setting process, like I said before, that I've used for the past 3 years. And when I look back at everything I'm able to accomplish, it comes back to this 90-day goal setting process. I mean, I have been able to create several courses. I've been able to write books. I've been able to stay up with 2 blogs, writing and publishing an editorial calendar, 2 podcasts. When people ask me, Jonathan, how do you get it all done? I tell them it's the 90-day goal setting process. So I am excited about sharing this with you guys. So let me just cover, just so that you know what you're going to learn today. So first, you're going to learn a simple 90-day goal setting process that I've used for the past 3 years. And I know I keep saying that, but how many of us have started using something only to later on figure out it doesn't work, or we just abandon it for something else? I know I've been guilty of that. I've been guilty of that with to-do managers. When I get one that I think I like, then all of a sudden I feel the need to go try a new one. But this 90-day process has essentially, for the most part, other than a few tweaks, has stayed the same for me. And I haven't left it in the dark. I always come back around to it. Anytime I feel like I've fallen off the wagon or have gotten out of sorts, which happens to me on a regular basis, I come right back to my 90-day goals, and it gets me back on track. It gets me back to the focus level that I want to be at on a regular basis. Number 2, I want to share with you how many 90-day goals is too much. And I don't know if you felt this with your 1-year goals, but you've probably felt like you had so much you wanted to accomplish, and it was painful for you to narrow them down because there's so much in your life you want to see change. There's so much transformation. There's so many ideas that you want to tackle, and it's painful for us to set things on the shelf, to set it aside. That's very true with yearly goals. I know because I've felt that pain. But it's a different with 90-day goals because you have the opportunity to change what you want to focus on every 90 days. It's a more fluid process, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. Number 3, you're going to learn the one thing that guarantees you'll finish your goals. I know that's a big promise, but if you stick with us, you're going to learn what that is. And then I'm also going to share with you how I do a quarterly review. And this is something I do every 90 days, and I'll share that process with you. And also, I'm going to leave some time to answer your questions. So whether it's related to 90-day goals or whether it's specifically for goal setting in general, I'm here to try to help you and would love the opportunity to answer questions. So again, for those of you just now showing up, so we have people that have come into the room. Glad you guys are here. Feel free to ask your questions, and I will answer as many as I can here in a few minutes. Darren asked, is this going to be available as a recording? Yes, this will be available as a recording, and I'll send out the link probably tomorrow. But for those of you that are here live, you will have the benefit of being able to ask me questions live to get clarification on what's being taught. So, and again, there's nothing to sell today. I have no other agenda other than teaching and adding value to you and sharing you my process. So you're not going to be, you're not going to get a bait and switch where I'm trying to sell anything. I'm just here to add value to you guys, to thank you for being here, and to thank you for participating in the goal setting course, and to thank you for investing in yourself. I know for me with the Best Year Ever course, I purchased it myself, and I sat down with my wife, and we actually spent a whole entire day going through our goals. And one of the things we did was we set up a monthly review where each month we are holding each other accountable to talk about where we're at with the goals that we set. Now, a couple of those are shared goals, and a couple of those are personal goals for each one of us. But putting that pressure and putting it on the calendar has meant everything for us. We already did our monthly review in January, and our monthly review in February is coming up real soon, and we'll talk and discuss that in a little bit. So here's the first thing I want to tackle, because this is a question that I do get from people when I share with them about my process, about my 90-day goal process. And the question I get is, why 90-day goals? Why do you do 90-day goals? Why don't you just do a yearly goal and break those down and just get all those done? Well, here's a few reasons, and maybe your personality is like mine. And I have a high need for change. And I also things come up throughout the year. And so for me to have a system that's not fluid enough is stifling to me and my creativity. And I want the creative freedom to be able to adjust when I need to adjust. And not saying you can't do that with yearly goals, but what I find with people is they establish their yearly goals, and then 6 months in, maybe 2 or 3 of them are no longer relevant, and they've got other ones. Sure, you can tweak and tool. You don't have to wait till next January to establish those new goals. But I find that having a regular structure that helps me hit the restart button, and to also be able to do a sprint during those 90 days helps me to get things done. So here's a few of the reasons. Number one, you gain incredible clarity as what needs to be accomplished right now. See, this is so important for me, especially as a learner and as a dreamer. I'm always constantly thinking about new ideas. And what happens is I live in the new ideas land, which is way up in the clouds, and nothing gets done. And I was like that for a long time until I began instituting these 90-day goals, because what it did was I didn't set something to be accomplished December 31st. I set a handful of goals that had to get done in the next 90 days. And that, my friend, will give you incredible clarity. And I know it will because it has for me. Another reason why I like to do 90-day goals is you're more motivated to work on your goals since you only have 90 days. Now, this is more of a mental trick, but when I see my 90-day goals listed, I think time is of the essence. This is what is most important, and this is what I need to get done, and it pushes me because I'm able to see that every single day. And what I want to get accomplished is within the next 3 months. Now, that doesn't mean that everything ends every 90 days as a goal. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But my handful of goals are reasonably able to be accomplished in a 3-month time frame. And that pushes me towards really getting it done. And then number 3 is you get the opportunity to hit the restart button every 90 days. You know, it's amazing to me every time I do a quarterly review and I begin thinking about my next 90 days, almost always, 1 or 2 of my goals are something that was not even on my radar the 90 days prior. And that, my friend, is what happens because we live in a time of sudden opportunity and change. And in an email, you can have your opportunity stream widened about an opportunity. And you want to be able to tackle that. You want to be able to be fluid. Now, that does not mean that we need to fall prey to what many call the shiny object syndrome. And the shiny object syndrome is where we're constantly distracted by anything new. But when a legitimate opportunity arises, you want to be able to take advantage and decide that that's what you want to move forward on. I'll give you a quick personal example. You know, my process of becoming an affiliate for Michael Hyatt with his goal setting course happened and came up on my radar in November. And I wasn't even thinking about that process, but in the process talking with him and his assistants, the opportunity was presented for me to be able to be a part of his affiliate program, which he only was going to let a handful of people participate. And so I was super excited about it because I felt like a lot of what he talks about in goal setting is a lot of what I talk about when it comes to simple life habits and productivity in some of my courses, like my Evernote course. And so I thought it was a good match and I believed in the product, and that's why I wanted to do it. But had I, been stuck on my yearly goals last year, I would have not had the opportunity to jump in. I would have told myself, well, maybe next time, because I really just have these yearly goals that I'm trying to focus on this year. I believe you need to be more fluid. And for me, I get the opportunity to hit the restart button every 90 days. And I always end up with a goal or two that was not on my radar prior. So those are just a few of the reasons, but I would love to hear from you. You can jump in to the chat box and tell me, does that make sense? Maybe just say yes, or that totally makes sense to me. I like the idea of a 90-day goal. And again, you don't have to do this exclusive from your 1-year goals, but you can do it as a complement to your yearly goals. Looks like Mary Lou says, I relate to what you're saying. I'm like that. I have to have change. I'm with you, Mary Lou. That's why I do these 90-day goals, and that's important to me. Those of you that have jumped in the Evernote course, you know that I talk about the idea incubation list. It is a list. It's a note inside Evernote, and anytime I have a new idea, it goes there. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit, but it's important for me to not chase my ideas, but to capture them and let them incubate. Because I've often gone back and looked at an idea and laughed and thought, what was I thinking? And then I've gone back and looked at an idea and thought, this is a great idea, but I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I don't know if, maybe there's some growing that I need to do, or maybe maybe my ideas before my time, but I'm going to let it sit here and let it incubate a little bit so I don't forget about it. And so in my idea incubation list, I have book title ideas, I have course ideas, I have projects that one day I'd love to be able to do, and they're in there, and I'm able to let them go for a little while because I have them captured somewhere. So I'll be talking about that in a little bit. So it looks like those of you here, you're responding and saying yes, makes sense. So great. Well, let's jump into the process. And Steve says, yes, makes sense to me. I think I'll use both 90-day goals as well as yearly goals. Yeah, absolutely. This is something you can use along with it. In fact, like I said before, I used the Best Year Ever course to establish my yearly goals, the things that I want to accomplish. And then some of those are actually broken down into smaller goals that I can get done. Now, some of them I'm able to get done in 90 days because they're a goal I want to accomplish, and I can reasonably get those done in 90 days. Others, there might be bigger projects, and I'm going to need to break that down into a smaller goal that helps me to move the bigger goal forward. And that's what 90-day goals do for me. Darren says, by the way, love your Evernote course and concept. Thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. At some point, I'm going to get in there and add some more videos and content and tutorials to it. That's what I hope to do on one of my 90-day goals coming very soon. So thank you for that. All right. So I'm going to walk you through basically the step-by-step format. And there's about 6 steps that you're going to be able to jot down. But before I do that, let me just share with you my 90-day structure. This is probably a given, but some of you may be wondering how I structure it. And so I'm just going to lay it out here for you. Maybe you can, if you're taking notes, you can jot these down and visit them later. But basically, I divide my year into 4 separate times. We could call them quarters. You can call them whatever you want. But as of the time of this recording, I'm in that first quarter, Q1, which is January to March. And April 1st is my deadline. So the goals that I choose for my 90 days, they all have to be reasonably done by April the 1st. Now, again, I don't try to make all of my 90-day goals due by April the 1st. I try to have a handful of both, and that helps me to kind of focus and know which one I needed to start on first most of the time. So I have January to March with an April 1st deadline. I have April to June with a July 1st deadline. I have July to September with an October 1st deadline, and an October to December with a January 1st deadline. So in other words, and we'll be getting to the quarterly review process, at the beginning of the year, I'm setting 90-day goals that I want to get accomplished by April the 1st. By the time the end of March is coming about, I began thinking about what my 90-day goals are that I want to get done by July 1st. Same thing, the beginning of July, what I want to get done by October 1st. And when we come to the end of September, I'm thinking about what do I want to get done by the end of the year. So if you have any questions about that, and I see more people have showed up, so glad you guys are here. If you've got questions, go ahead and ask those questions in the chat box, and I'll answer those in just a little bit. All right, so for now, we're going to keep rolling. So let's talk about step number 1. So step 1 is to select no more than 5 goals. Now, there has been times where I've cheated and gone to 6 because I absolutely just could not get it any lower. But the temptation here for you and for me is to select like 10 goals that we want to get done. And the reality is we have too much that we're facing, And most of us, and I know this is one of my biggest faults, is I'm overly optimistic with my time. And so what helps me is to really try and select no more than 5 goals. I've got 5 goals right now that I'm looking at, and I'll share some of those with you here in just a little bit. And these are goals that I'm trying to get done by April the 1st. Some of them I've been able to get done, and others I'm still working hard to get them done. But it is important that you work to try and select no more than 5 goals. And the reason why you can kind of let this go is because you have an opportunity to hit the restart button in 90 days, and you can go a totally different direction. Now, the question might be, well, if I finish a couple of those before the 90 days and something short, can I add something in there? You can, but I work hard to make sure I cross off every one of those 5 goals. The goals that I select are goals that I am absolutely committed to getting done in the next 90 days. It's not, well, it'd be nice to get it done, or this is something I've talked about for a while. No, this is my focus, and this is what I'm going to get done. And doing that has been able to create incredible focus for me. So that would be my first bit of advice. Based on my own mistakes, especially early on, I would try to put too many goals. So select no more than 5 goals. Step 2, write your goal in a visible location. This is so important because most of us, what happens is we have them hidden and they become sight unseen, and we forget about what's not visible. And you got to make these visible. Even if you use Evernote, I do have Evernote that has my my goals, especially my 90-day goals, has my yearly goals, and I do work to review those. But that's not the only place. One of the things that I use and have used for a couple years now is I have a smaller whiteboard that hangs directly above my desk on the wall. I'm staring at it right now, and it has my 90-day goals listed. And when people often ask me about this, I tell them the reason I've done this is because I get distracted. The urgent comes in the way of the important, and you are constantly pulled in a lot of different directions. And when I have it on a whiteboard, it hovers over me like a boss. Since I work for myself, I have to wear the boss hat and the worker hat, and I have to play those 2 roles. But what can happen for most of us is we enjoy wearing the boss hat so much that we forget that we got to put our overalls on, roll up our sleeves, and get to work. And that sometimes we got to do the hard work. It's fun to dream. It's fun to plan. Taking action is so important. And yet, for some of us, we struggle with it because it's not as fun. And so what we need to do is make our goals visible. I have a good friend. What he does with his 90-day goals is he actually tapes them on a sticky note. He takes a sticky note, writes his 90-day goals, and then tapes them right on his computer, on his laptop. So whenever he opens his laptop, it's staring at him. He's got some space. If you have a laptop kind of like me, there's some space between where the mouse trackpad is and where you type. And so next to that is where he's taped his sticky note. Maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe it's an index card you put in a wallet or a purse. Maybe you tape it to the desk where you work, or hang it on a wall close by you. For me, it is on a whiteboard, and it has January to March, quarter number 1, and then it has my 5 goals listed. So make your goals visible. This is an absolute must. Step 3, start your goal with an action verb. Now, this is so important because what happens is we just have a tendency to put something down, like book launch, if we're wanting to write a book, or book proposal, if we're wanting to get a book proposal written and sent to a potential publisher. And so what happens is our brain doesn't work that way. Your brain is motivated by words. And when you read these words, and I do the same thing with my to-do list, what I do is I start each goal, and I do this also with my to-do list, with an action verb. And I actually write it in all caps to make it really visible. I used to be a career coach. Well, I used to be an executive recruiter. And so I learned a thing or two about building dynamic resumes. And one of the things that builds a dynamic resume are the powerful action verbs you use to make your presentation look attractive on paper, because people are judging you on paper, your presentation on paper, far before they ever meet you. That's how powerful words are. And words can be the same for us. So I'll give you a couple of the words that I have on my 5 goals. I have launch. Another one is gain, launch, draft. Actually, it is, draft, first copy of a book proposal, launch, speaking pages, which I'm updating, gain clarity on branding elements for my Jonathan Milligan blog, launch the new version of Blogging Your Passion University, and launch the 15 traits book that I actually have coming out this week. And so I get inspired by that when I think about gaining clarity. I love that. Or when I think about launching my new university, or launching the 15 traits, or drafting the first copy of my book proposal. And so what are the things that you can do to write your goal in such a way that it's inspiring to look at? So start your goal with an action verb. All right, I see a couple questions coming in. I'm going to get to your questions just a little bit, but go ahead and ask them anyway. And here's step number 4. And this, I give total credit to Michael Hyatt, because it has been a game changer for me. And that's to make a short list of motivations for each goal. And you learn this in the Best Year Ever process, but I love this concept, because how many times do we become unmotivated to go after our goals because we kind of lose our why a little bit? And I think this is so incredibly important. And it's something that I like to review at least weekly. If not, I look at it whenever I'm paying attention to my goals. But I think it really helps me to have some of those key motivations. I was talking about drafting that first copy of the book proposal. That's part of a bigger goal that I have for this year, which is to secure a book contract for a book idea I have called The Gift, that helps people discover their gift. And so when I wrote down some key motivations, I wrote things like, to call myself a published author. Well, I've self-published my own books, but I would love to be able to be a published author through a traditional book publisher. I wrote down to empower others that their life matters and has a purpose. I wrote to have books to sell for future speaking events, to create more ancillary products that shoot off of the concept of the book, to push myself to do something new and different, actually having a book in a bookstore, to grow my platform on Jonathan Milligan beyond just my blog readers. So those are motivating factors for me to secure a book contract this year. And it's something that is helpful to review, especially when you lose some of your motivation for getting those things done. So I know you guys probably know this one, but it's just a reminder to you that maybe it's helpful for you at least to jot down one key motivating factor you want to accomplish the goals that you do each of the 90 days. All right, here's step number 5. And this is so important. Start each day with a focus session to crush your goals. This has been a key factor for me over the last couple of years. It started for me when I finally decided to make a go of trying to become a full-time blogger, because I found that I just had too many competing activities that were happening, and I didn't know how to create more margin to work on this passionate side hustle that I had. And for me, I was working as an executive recruiter during the day. That was what I did. It was constantly on the phone, networking, talking to people. And so very little time for blogging. And so at night, my kids were involved in sports and soccer and Little League baseball and church activities, and life's busy. And so for me, what I had to finally do is decide I was going to work for myself first each day. And when I actually started this process, I was not a morning person. It was the last thing I probably wanted to do. I would have considered myself to be more of a night person. And it's actually when I started drinking coffee too. I never drank coffee until I started doing my early morning work sessions. But I figured out that from 5 to 7 a.m. every day, I wasn't getting phone calls. I definitely wasn't going to be on Facebook or Twitter or checking email. My kids weren't going to interrupt me because they were still asleep. And so that for me was a breakthrough for me. I was able to find 10 hours a week that I could follow my passion and build my blog. Now, today it looks differently. Of course, being able to work full-time, it's structured a little bit differently. I actually have, this morning success routine I go through with working out and spending time with my kids before they go off to school and things like that. But when I start my workday on purpose, I do not check email. I do not check social media. The first thing I do is I jump on my most important task. I do this simple journaling exercise. It has some prompts. And there's a couple of questions that I use in my journal that really help me to determine what it is I need to do. And so one of the questions I answer each morning is, what would make today great? Whenever I answer that question, it's surprising that sometimes the answer is not on my to-do list, even though I've got a bunch of stuff to do. But when I answer that question, what would make today great? The next thing I say is, well, how long would it take me to get that done? And I need to do that first thing. And so what I do is I jump immediately into a focus session. And this focus session for me lasts between 60 and 90 minutes. And I'm usually totally isolated. I have the ability to close my door, put music on, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not distracted by anything else. In fact, on that same whiteboard with my 90-day goals, I have a quote from Gary Keller from his book, The One Thing. And the quote is this: "Until my one thing is done, everything else is a distraction." And I'll look at that first thing in the morning and I'll say, you know what? When I answer the question, what would make today great? That's the thing I need to do today, and I got to do it right now. And everything else is a distraction. And I can't tell you how much better my day goes. Now, my afternoon, sometimes I'm tapped out from my creative juices and power, and I start feeling a lull, and I'm not as productive because, after all, we're not machines, we're human beings. And so you need to go easy on yourself. Sometimes we're so hard on ourselves that We expect that we can always be at this high level of productivity, and it's just not the case. And so what I found is my most productive time is in the morning. I love how Gary Keller explains it in the book. He explains it as if it's your willpower is like a cell phone battery. It's a green light in the mornings. But as your day goes, it turns yellow and then it gets to red. And how many of us have seen that red battery icon on our iPhones? And when you try to do your best work when you're on red, it just doesn't work. I mean, it's twice as hard. It takes you twice as long to do anything. And so the thing that I tell myself regularly is do creative work first and do reactive work second. And so I push anything that has to do with more reactive work, like email, social media, anything else that might pop up in a day. I try to protect my mornings, and especially I try to protect my first hour to hour and a half every day, because I want to get whatever is going to make it a great day. That's the thing I want to get done first. So I've spent a lot of time on this point, but I think it's so important that you catch this, because it's been liberating for me. Because how many of us love to check our email? How many of us love to check our social media? It's a dopamine rush. It's like this addiction that we keep going back to and compulsively check our email. Well, if that's true, then why don't we just use it to our advantage? And the way that I use it to my advantage is you can check your email and you can check your social media right after you get the most important thing done. I mean, use it as a reward. Use the ability to check your email and to check in with your social media as a reward for getting that one thing done first. So I hope that's helpful to you, because that is how you take action on your 90-day goals. All right. Step 6, let me talk about the quarterly review. So typically the way it works for me is as a quarter is winding down, I like to take an entire morning. Typically it's on a Friday, and it's usually a time when I like to be doing my weekly review and kind of cleaning up the office around me, paying any bills, looking at things that maybe I've procrastinated on that I need to get done. But then I carve out some time to evaluate. First of all, I evaluate, how did I do? With those 5 things I chose, were they too big? Were they too easy? Are there things that I didn't get done? And should I consider pulling that into the next 90 days? Honestly, I rarely pull something into the new 90 days, because if I didn't get it done, I begin to question whether I needed to get it done in the first place. Sometimes what we think is a priority for us, we find out later it's just not the right time for it. So don't beat yourself up if you get to the end and you accomplish 3 out of the 5 or 4 out of the 5. Try not to beat yourself up. If you do decide to reset that as a new 90-day goal, you're going to need to figure out some way to rephrase it, to reframe it, to dive in a little deeper as to your motivations. Because what we don't want to do is end up using 2 or 3 of our goals and pulling them into our whole year, and we're just procrastinating on it. And you honestly got to look at it and evaluate that. But what I like to do is I typically, after I look at, how look in the past, how did my last 90 days go? Then what I'll do is I will take a quick look into my Evernote, and I will look at my idea incubation list. Now, this is something I talk about in my EverFocus course, but as a quick review, I have a note and you can have it on a piece of paper if you want. That's just called my idea incubation list. And it's where all my ideas go to live and to stay, so that I don't forget about them. See, I have this theory that the reason why we run with a new idea is because we're afraid we're going to forget about it. Or we're so excited about it that we just want to jump in and do that thing. But what's helped me is to govern that a little bit by putting on a list that I know it will remain safe, and I can review it every 90 days. And so I'll look over that list and say, which 4 or 5 things on this list make the most sense for me to jump in and do next? And then I'll begin to craft it and word it in a way just similar to what Michael Hyatt talks about. Start that with an action verb, end it with a date, which I have dates on all of my 90-day goals. Some of them I have listed right now are February the 1st, some are April the 1st. One is March the 1st. But all of them fall under those 90-day period that I'm in. And so what I'll do from there is once I kind of decide what those are, I'll erase, of course, the ones on my whiteboard. I'll write down the new ones. I'll add the new ones in my Evernote file. And I'll try to, honestly, if I can, I'll try to take action on one of them right away. Just the feeling of taking action on something new can be incredibly exciting. The only other thing that I would suggest that I haven't mentioned already is I'm a part of a mastermind group. And so I'm sharing a lot of what I'm wanting to be held accountable for with them on a regular basis. In fact, I do it almost on the runway level, where I'll tell them we meet every Thursday at 4 o'clock. And so I'll tell them by next Thursday, this is what I'm going to get done. And it always comes off of one of my 90-day goals, because that becomes my priority. So with that, I am going to take some questions from you guys. So that is the process. Hopefully that is helpful for you guys. And so I want you to go ahead and ask your questions now. I see some questions that have come in. And before I get to those, I want to answer a couple questions that came in via email. So that way I don't forget about it. I think there were 2 questions that I remember. So the first question is from Zach, and he says, how do you follow through with your goals and make sure you stay on track? I think I did a good job setting up my goals, but sticking to them and staying on schedule with them is something I have trouble with. Yeah, absolutely, Zach. And it's key because, part of the process is setting those goals, but there's a whole nother process of remembering them and doing them. Some of the stuff I've already shared, but I'll recap it real quick. The things that have helped me, again, is to make them visible. Write them on a whiteboard, because whenever I find myself, and we all catch ourselves doing this, I'm just as guilty, where we're wasting time. Maybe we saw an email which led to a video, and that video led to other videos, and somehow that led to Facebook, and then you kind of catch yourself, wait a minute, I'm kind of playing around here, I'm not working. What I do is I take a deep breath, I look up at my whiteboard, and I'm reminded what's important to me. And then I look at that and think, okay, what is an action step I can take on that right now? Now, this, of course, is apart and aside from what I talked about earlier about what would make today great. I think if you ask yourself that question enough days in a row and you answer it, and then you're not doing it, it becomes pretty obvious to you. And so, and I saw a question come in about the journaling prompts. I'll share with you mine in just a few minutes here. But that question really helps me, because if I'm answering what would make today great and I keep saying the same thing and then I'm not spending my time doing it, there's a disconnect there, because what I want to do and what I'm doing are 2 different things. That's not good. And so by answering that question, it helps you to keep on track, because you're forced to look at that on a regular basis. So that's the big thing. The other thing, Zach, I would encourage you, if you have a spouse or if you have a close friend, I would encourage you to set up a monthly meeting where you review the goals that you're working on. Like I mentioned earlier with my wife, we actually, when we set our goals, we actually looked at the calendar and we set up a monthly review every single month of the year. We figured out a morning to do it. Now for us, we're going to go out to breakfast and we're going to bring our goals with us and we're going to share, this is what I was able to get done. Here's what I wasn't. I'm procrastinating on this and don't know why. Sometimes it's helpful to get that accountability and perspective from other people. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Next question's from Steve. Not sure if this is the same Steve that's here, but I did see that we have a Steve here. So maybe this is your question, Steve. You can let me know if that's you, but if not, I'll go ahead and answer it. Jonathan, could you please explain the process you go through in breaking down a large project into bite-sized pieces? I appreciate your approach. By the way, really enjoying your bonus ever-focused material I received due to my purchase of Best Year Ever course from Michael Hyatt. I've instituted this in my daily workflow. It's been very helpful. Awesome. The easiest way for me to break down large projects is this 90-day goal process. And then the way to break it down further is that question, what would make today great? Because that's going to help me to start on what is most important to me. So it is the process. And that's why I love this 90-day goal process so much, is because it helps me to just break those large projects down. For example, my large project, one of my yearly goals is to secure the book contract. Well, in order to secure the book contract, what needs to happen? I need to write the first draft of my book proposal so I can begin shopping around my idea to potential publishers. And so that became my goal for this first 90 days. So instead of this overwhelming, I want to get, I want to sign a book contract. It's, well, what do I need to do first? Well, really what I need to do first is get a draft of a book proposal. And so that for me, just, it's almost like I kind of put the other big project on the shelf and I just focus on the smaller one. And that helps me because how many of us have gotten overwhelmed and we don't start because our project or our goal is so big. And it's so big that it stops us from taking action because we're overwhelmed by all the different pieces that have to happen in order to get that done. Instead, you got to set a smaller sub goal. And that's where the power of 90-day goals helps me. So I hope that helps. All right. Steve says a couple comments. He says, I've been guilty of being too optimistic on what I think I get done. I'm the same way. So welcome. I'm starting to get better at it, but I'm still too optimistic. Steve says, I'm interested to know more about what your daily journaling prompts are. So let me share those with you. And so I'm just going to read these to you. You guys can write them down. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 journal prompts that I do every morning. And some of these are taken from other places. And some of these come from something called the 5-Minute Journal. If you guys have seen that, it's both an app and a physical journal book that you can get. And they have science behind the way that the questions are worded that help to prompt you to take more action in your life and to figure out what matters most. So let me just, and I don't use them the exact way that the 5-Minute Journal is kind of outlined to do a couple questions in the morning and a couple questions in the evening. I find that I never get to the ones in the evening. So I've reworded the questions a little bit to get them all that I do them all in the morning. So here's the 7 questions. Question number 1 is, it's not really a question for this first one, but here's number 1. 3 amazing things that happened yesterday. So I just quickly jot down, I think about my day yesterday and was like, what was amazing yesterday? And I just write those down, and it helps remind me of the good things that are happening in my life, both professionally and personally. Number 2, how could I have made yesterday better? I think that is such an important question, because you get to the heart of why you're procrastinating, or maybe what you did that you wish you would have done differently. It gives you the opportunity to live yesterday over again. And while that may seem a little negative, I think it's important, because how can you fix today unless you evaluate yesterday? Number 3, I am grateful for, and I jot down 3 things. And we all know the power of gratitude. Gratitude helps us. It shakes us out of that scarcity mentality, and it puts us in a mindset of abundance. Number 4, how am I feeling right now? Now, I know, especially for you guys out there, you don't like to necessarily tap into your feelings, but I wasn't so sure if that was going to be a question that I got any use from when I started, but I surprisingly like answering that question, because if I truthfully answer, how am I feeling right now? Either I'm feeling optimistic, or I'm feeling tired, or I'm feeling, what you do often follows your emotions. And so you got to get your emotions set in order if you're going to get productive for the day. Number 5 is like a daily affirmation, and I just finished the sentence, I am. So I may do something like, I am a published author who has a best-selling book. I'm just using it as an example, since I was using that as an example for one of my goals this year. And so it just helps me to see myself. A lot of times we have to have the ability to see ourselves in a future light in order to call ourselves up to be that person. It's much like, for those of you that follow Jeff Goins, it's much like how empowering it was for him to say, I am a writer. I just need to write. I mean, that was an affirmation for him that he needed to claim. And for some of us, we need to claim our identity on a regular basis so that we can get over the fear of not being good enough and to step forward into that thing we're supposed to do. Number 6 is, what would make today great? That's what I talked about earlier. And for me, this forces me to write down one thing. And sometimes it's not in the professional aspect. Sometimes it's personal. There's been times where I've written down to stop working when my kids get home from school and take them to the park and play with them for an hour. Because, one of the things transparently that I struggle with is I have the ability to control when, where, and how of my work, and I don't always give myself permission to do so. And it's like, I've gotten into the mindset that I work until 5 o'clock. I'm like, well, who made up that? I know employers do, but when you work for yourself, you can choose to take the afternoon off if you want to. It's up to you. So for me, sometimes personal stuff bubbles up when I answer that question. And then lastly, what are my plans for today? And I usually try to write down 5 things. And even though I have a to-do list, and I have a way that I capture all my to-dos, the things I need to get done, when I have to rewrite out a short to-do list every morning, that helps me to know what's most important. Sometimes those things are already on my to-do list, and sometimes they're not. So those are the questions that help me And that takes me, 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. I use it in Evernote, and I just duplicate the note, add the new date, and the questions are already there, and I just answer them. So that's really helped me. All right. Let's see. We got a couple minutes here. If you guys have any more questions, I think I'm going to re-look over the comments and questions here. I think I've answered all of them. Thank you guys for all the kind comments that you've been sharing. But if you guys have any other questions, we got just a couple minutes before we wrap up here today. Let me make sure I don't have any other questions in my email. Looks like we're good. All right, and it looks like I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think we're going to wrap this up. So, so you guys, hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, I'd love to hear what's the big takeaway. What was one insight that you got today? And sharing it, I'll share it with everybody else. But go ahead and take a moment and in the chat box, just share with me one insight. One insight that we shared today that is going to be helpful for you, that you're excited about giving a try. So while you're doing that, let me jump back over to video. So go ahead again and share one insight you got from today. Here's a question from Steve. He says, when do you have just open creative thinking? Yeah, this is important. I don't do it as routine as I need to do it, but I usually try to use Friday afternoons because honestly, Friday afternoon, it's hard for me to work because I'm already kind of thinking about the weekend, but I love disengaging from my work and doing more creative thinking. And so I'll clear out one of my whiteboards. I've got 3 in my office, and I love using whiteboards for just brainstorming any and every creative idea. Saturday mornings, sometimes for me, turn into creative thinking because my kids are at that age where they love to sleep in. So I've got a couple hours, usually on Saturday morning. And so I have this book review process. You can learn about it over at jonathanmilligan.com if you go back a few posts. And I review, not only do I have a daily review of some of the notes from some of the books I've read, but I do this weekly review of books. And when I do that, usually it'll begin thinking and churning up ideas. And I'll kind of allow myself on Saturday mornings to do that for a little bit. But I really try to shut down Saturday mornings once my kids wake up. And I try to really shut down until Sunday night where I can begin thinking about my week. I think it's important that we unplug. For me, I take what I call a technology fast, and I unplug for 24 hours. And so I'll usually end it Saturday morning and not pick up anything or do anything with the computer until Sunday night. And that is helpful for me. Here's a few of the insights people shared. Darren said focus on the 90-day goals and the rest of the goals. Nancy says, I'm going to start writing in my journal again. I think this will help keep me on track. Awesome, Nancy. Steve said, my one big insight is until my one thing is done, everything else is a distraction. Yeah, that's so good. And it's been so helpful for me, Steve. He said that's a huge takeaway for me. So awesome. Well, listen, this is I'm going to share this recording with you guys. You'll get a link tomorrow, and you can rewatch this anytime you want. So I appreciate you again being here. I appreciate you participating and investing in yourself in the goal setting process with Michael Hyatt's Best Year Ever. And I hope it's been helpful for you. And I hope today has kind of helped you hit the restart button. You know, maybe right now, if you want to get into the same regular cycle that I'm in, you know, you still have 5 weeks before April the 1st. So maybe you set 1 or 2 goals right now, just as a test pilot. What is something reasonable that I could get done in the next 5 weeks for, you know, before April the 1st? And then as you get to the end of March, begin thinking about what are 5 90-day goals that I want to get done by July 1st. And I promise you, if you'll allow yourself to get into this routine, you'll find that you'll accomplish much more faster than you would otherwise. So I appreciate you guys being here. And a couple more comments. Mary Lou says, it's helpful to know that blending 1-year goals along with 90-day goals can leave me room for something new to be added. Absolutely. I've always worked in 90-day plans and just wasn't sure how to blend in 1-year goals. Cool. And Darren said that he meant to say reset. So he says focus on the 90-day process and reset goals. I think that's good, Darren, and very important. All right, guys. So thanks so much for hanging out and investing in yourself for a little bit this afternoon. And if you guys aren't already on my email list, either on jonathanmilligan.com or on bloggingyourpassion.com, I do regular webinars where we do something similar like we're doing right now and do some training and help for you, whether it's productivity, self-development, or creating an online business that you can build to work for yourself. So with that, I'm going to sign out. Thank you guys for being here today.